you think about the council manager form of government and how it's functioned in Bath overall, but really in the last 7 years you can see its value, especially when council and the manager play their roles to a T, working in contemporaneous harmony with each other. In terms of the following, the methodology behind the council manager form of government, council sets the goals and the outcomes. And the job of the manager, through my authority, although not absolute authority, because council always has the final say, it's to see to it that those goals and outcomes are achieved and to lend myself to the decision-making process. So over the last 7 years, Bath's government worked through some big decisions. Before we decided what we needed to do, we needed to know what our goals and objectives were going to be. For example, council's outcome for the residential registry and inspection program, or council's outcome to fix traffic congestion issues in the downtown area, or council's outcome to become more financially stable through evaluating police services options, was what we did, or council's outcome to find a new home for the municipal operations. And in all these cases, the issues needed to be broken down into smaller sub-goals or objectives along the way. So I'll focus on one goal and outcome: the historic move of municipal operations to the new location and facility we're at now. Residents had long complained the old municipal building should be retired. And as council and I were thinking about this project, still working from the old municipal building, which was an old converted schoolhouse built in the early 1900s. The writing was literally on the wall for moving operations, or in our case, it was in the ceiling, but now on the floor. Literally, I went upstairs to the council chambers to do something, prepare for a meeting maybe. I walked into the room and I noticed a corner of the ceiling had fallen apart, ripped through the drop ceiling, and crashed into the podium and the desk where I sit for meetings. And that was the running joke at the time. The municipal building was literally falling down around us. This was a common theme. Parts of the building kept failing. The roof needed repair, brick mortar was failing, and the retaining wall on the west side of the property needed to be completely replaced. It was just one thing after the other, and it was bleeding taxpayer money in the borough here. We needed to channel our focus into smaller goals so we could move on a trajectory towards the overall big picture, and ultimately where the public would want to meet and conduct borough business, and operations would serve 21st century demands. So there were many ways to approach the overall outcome. One of the first objectives was to consider refurbishing the former municipal building as to serve many different purposes, or user groups like Slatington Borough, and how they adaptively reused an old schoolhouse. Should the borough relocate altogether, building something new on property it owned, or to buy vacant land and build there? Different ways to approach this. I personally, at the time, liked the idea of renovating the schoolhouse. And my job as manager is to provide council with that information, or decision packages. In other words, options along the way to making the best move with the informative decisions in a way forward to tackle objectives and ultimately get us to the final goal. So years ago, under a former manager, one idea was floated, and that was to build a new municipal building somewhere near Firefighters Field at the time. It would have had all the amenities needed for governing in the 21st century. The idea sounded reasonable, and I'll admit, considering renovation to a structure can cost considerably more than it would just to build new. But there were other problems with the potential location. It was within close proximity of the mighty Monocacy Creek, which would have set the municipal building near a floodplain, and this had disaster written all over it. So instead of the shotgun approach to ideas, I felt the best approach was to bring in experts to consult with council on figuring out what we should be thinking in terms of a new building. Sometimes you need to study a problem up and down, and that may require outside help. If I was to get council to the new municipal building, we needed to know all the possible solutions and what their cost would be. So in 2015, the borough contracted with KCBA Architects, and we began cataloging the options. We looked at new construction, we looked at adaptive reuse of the old schoolhouse. The schoolhouse could accommodate different users. There'd be office space, which could in turn generate lease revenue. That was one idea. And one idea was to actually completely rebuild the public works and the fire department which would also accommodate municipal offices all in one location. And as the old saying goes, when you're least expecting, sometimes opportunity presents itself. Longtime Bath fireman and local business owner Roger Rarick of the Thirst Quenchers passed away. His business partner and family reached out to the borough to buy the property. Thirst Quenchers was located almost directly in the center of town, and the space was just right for a new municipal headquarters. It fit well with the concept of locating near the public works and the fire department. It was a good thing too, because of all the options council had the power to choose from: adaptive reuse of the old schoolhouse, relocating to a new building, or any attempt to knock down and build a municipal complex where the public works and fire department was located, were all propositions in the multi-million-dollar range. So just too much money. But when we studied the adaptive reuse of the Thirst Quenchers building, the cost was around $1.2 million and suddenly more palatable. A quarter of the cost compared to the other options. And remember, Bath still needed to purchase the property and then find a contractor. So from there, things began to fall into place. Council purchased Thirst Quenchers. The next big step was to figure out the renovation contractor. And I had some background in the construction trades, but none in the commercial trades. And as part of my job to reach our goal was to get the project done on time and preferably under budget. And I remember working this idea out through with legal, but what if the borough had served as general contractor? This way we could save money. The idea was anyone who wanted to volunteer their labor and expertise to help with the renovations, we might be able to do this project at a fraction of the cost. It was bold. Council certainly handed over a tremendous amount of authority to me, probably more than I really needed, and it's what we wound up doing. My job was to manage by day, work on the renovations with fellow volunteers by evening and weekend. We did this for about a year before it was all said and done. We did hire some contractors for certain construction tasks that were too complicated for volunteers to do. Everything worked out. We had some 22 volunteers, including members of Borough Council and their families. Council's outcome was to find a new municipal building location, saving taxpayers with continual maintenance costs in the old building. We wanted to move borough operations into the 21st century. All in, the total project cost the borough around $735,000. And this included the purchase price, opposed to $1.2 million the researchers had originally said. So the borough wound up saving in the entire construction $465,000 through the process. So looking back, it's a great example of the council manager form of government at work. Council set out the goals and objectives. My job was to aid in the decision-making process along the way. Council made all the ultimate decisions. The day-to-day was left in my discretional authority. I had the authority to run both government operations, but also serve as the general contractor of the new municipal building project, seeing it through to the end. And this is just one example of our successes here in the borough. So Bath continues to capitalize on big decision issues because of the way we apply this council manager form of government. Council's power and the manager's authority blend and operate in harmony to define new moments in Bath's history, bringing about necessary change and meeting the demands of our citizens.